How does this this budget fit with two things? One is the health care legislation that's pending, and also the looming shutdown of the government prospectively, as well as the debt ceiling. How do these all come together for you?
Well, first of all, what we need to do is work on our budget, and the president did give us his idea of what the budget should be. As a matter of fact, today in our budget committee, we will have the director of OMB, Mick Mulvaney, there to discuss what their ideas are in the budget, how they got to the numbers that they got to, and we'll be hearing from him. And then we will, of course, this is a collaborative effort. We'll be working with the Senate and the House, and ultimately it is the Congress that has the power of the purse. So we do all work together, but I think ultimately what you see in the plan that came out from the president yesterday is that he wants to get our spending under control. That's what I came here to do 7 years ago, and I'm so delighted that we now have an administration that understands we cannot keep up with this deficit spending.
So specifically, though, can you do a budget if you don't know how much money you're saving or spending on health care, if you don't know what the law of the land is on that?
But we do have, obviously, a number from the CBO will be coming out, I believe, this afternoon on what was done on our side. And we will, of course, wait to see what the Senate is doing. But we can make some assumptions from what we have done in doing our budget. So, yes, they do all fit together.
So you said that this does show fiscal discipline, the president's plan, because it shows we're going to get our spending under control. In fairness, it's increased spending on defense and reduced spending on domestic programs. Isn't that right? So it's not just we're cutting back spending, we're cutting back some places and we're increasing it others.
Well, you are right on that, but then there's a mandatory side that is very important because you're talking just about the discretionary side. And only a third of our budget is actually on the discretionary side. As a matter of fact, we have done a pretty good job over the last 7 years or 6 years that I've been here on the discretionary side. But the biggest driver of our debt is on the mandatory side, and there's only 5 programs there. And so we've got to dig into those, and that is what the president has done in his plan. And we also have some ideas on that, and we'll be putting that forward over the next several weeks here.
Well, when you talk about mandatory, first of all, there's interest. There's not a lot you can do about that, and the interest may go up.
But you can stop the deficit spending.
Well, okay, let's talk about the deficits.
The
largest parts are Social Security and Medicare, and the president has said those are off the table. Are you willing to put them back on the table?
Well, right now we are working in our budget on looking at the issues on Medicare, which we have done in the past. You know, we've put that out over the 6 years that I've been here in reforming Medicare. The program was put into place back in the 1960s. Obviously, it does need to have some reform. We've had a change in our population, an aging population, and so the mandatory spending on the Medicare side is something that we will have in our budget. We will talk about that in our budget.
So as I understand it, Representative, just to make sure we're clear, you respectfully disagree with the president on that because the president says, I'm not going to touch Medicare.
Well, the president has he has said he wants to save Medicare, and so he doesn't have that in his budget. But we will be putting a plan out for some changes in Medicare, as we have done in the past 6 years that I've been here.
As you go forward with the budget, to what extent do you want to take into account possible consequences of tax reform? That's another element of this that could affect the budget.
Absolutely. And it is one of our priorities is that we would get tax reform because we know that tax reform would stimulate the economy. And obviously there are two ways to balance a budget. One is to bring in more money and the other is to cut on the other side and to find a balance between the two. But we want to see this economy grow. And that is very, very important that we would do tax reform. And so we've got to balance all of these issues and priorities. And that's what we're working on in our budget committee.
So to wrap this up, Congressman, give us a sense of timetable. When would you hope to have something out, voted on by the House with respect to the budget?
Well, we're looking at the June time frame, and I don't have an exact date for when that would be, but we're hoping to get our budget out there so that folks can see our budget and we can vote on that sometime out of our budget committee sometimes here in June.
Because you do have an August recess. And is that sort of a deadline for you to get something done? Because when we come back in September, we do have this both question of the overall deficit limit as well as a continuing resolution.
Yes. Well, I hope that our part of the process of getting the budget out of the committee and getting it to our body will happen here in June. Yes.
Okay.